Today you guys get a real treat. This is a famous battle between two former world champions, Boris Spassky and Mikhail Tal. Tal was of course a fierce attacking player, always sacrificing material for the initiative. Spassky had a more rounded style. He could beat you in a positional grind, but he was very much at home in sharp tactical positions as well. Both players were amazing, but only one would win today's game. This was played in Estonia in 1973. Spassky had white and opened with d4, knight f6, c4, e6, and after knight to c3, bishop to b4 by Tal, and so we have a Nimzo-Indian defense. Black wants to gain control over e4 by pinning the knight, but Spassky countered that by pinning Tal's knight with bishop to g5. Now that's definitely an offbeat line, but it was a favorite of Spassky's and it often leads to sharp games, so it's good for the spectators. Tal played h6, which is a clever move. Black saying if you retreat to h4, then a bishop cannot go back to defend on the queen side anymore, and then moves like c5 and queen to a5 will be more dangerous for white. But Spassky didn't back down, he did go to h4. So c5 by Tal. Spassky decided he'd rather grab space than allow black to trade pawns, so d5, but Tal fought back immediately with b5. Very sharp move, it kinda looks like a Blumenfeld gambit now. Basically, Tal undermines white's center by attacking the defender of d5. Now, white can therefore defend d5 with e4, but it gets super sharp after g5, bishop g3, knight takes e4, and bishop to e5. And perhaps Spassky didn't want to engage Tal in a complicated game like this. Instead, Spassky took on e6, and then he did accept Tal's pawn sack by taking on b5. So Spassky wasn't afraid, he was also very strong in complicated tactical games, but of course after d5, Tal did get some impressive pawns in the center of the board, but Spassky has an extra pawn. Let's see what happened. e3, castles, knight to f3, just developing, but then queen to a5 as suggested earlier. So again, black's exploiting the fact that the dark squared bishop is on the king side now, and black wants to increase the pressure on the knight with knight to e4 next move. Therefore, bishop takes knight, rook takes, queen d2 covering the knight. The knight is still pinned, but black cannot exploit that now. And now a6 by Tal, and at this point Spassky does make a little slip. After the game, Tal suggested that bishop to e2 was probably white's best, and modern engines do agree with that. And when black takes his pawn back, simply castle. Black is definitely somewhat better because of these great pawns, but at least the king is safe. However, in the game, white wanted to keep the extra pawn and captured on a6, and everything would be okay for white if black just took like this, allowing white to develop the bishop in one move, and then castle, but of course black isn't forced to play like that. Tal instead played a much better move, knight to c6, not allowing white to develop with tempo, but also guarding the d4 square. Why does that matter, you may ask? It matters because after bishop to e2, black has a really powerful sequence of moves, starting with d4, so engaging white when the king is still unsafe in the middle of the board, very important principle to remember. And after pawn takes, Tal really spiced things up with rook takes f3, great move, the knight was guarding d4, and so after bishop takes, c takes d4, the c-pawn is still defended, and black is winning some material back, because remember, that knight is still pinned. Spassky now rushes to castle, but then pawn takes knight, and after b takes c3, bishop takes, it's still complicated for both sides. If we quickly check the material, for the moment black has two pieces for the rook, but white has two extra pawns. The knight on c6 is looking loose though, but the question is, can white exploit that? After queen to d6, it does look like the knight is lost, it's now attacked twice, but Tal did find the best move. Now what he shouldn't do is take on a1, so this did not happen, but I do want to show that black can still lose the game. After this greedy capture, white takes on c6, attacking the rook. After rook to b8, there's queen e8 check, only one move, king to h7, and kind of out of nowhere, black is getting checkmated. After bishop e4 check, even giving up the queen would only delay checkmate. And if black doesn't sack the queen but goes g6, then it's just mate after queen g6 check, king h8 and queen h7 mate. But as I said, Tal did play the best move, and that is rook takes a6, and you'll see why. After Spassky takes on c6, then bishop to b4 guarantees that white drops the bishop on c6. The bishop is attacked by the rook, and as you can see, the queen cannot defend the bishop and save herself. White is not lost though, and Spassky also finds the best continuation. Remember, he was still world champion only a year before. He played queen to b8, and after rook takes, rook from a to c1, good move. Black cannot trade rooks, because white is pinning and winning the piece on c8, and again black would be losing. So bishop to c5 instead, shielding the rook. Rook c2, clearly intending to double rooks, since the bishop and rook are somewhat awkwardly placed, but black isn't in danger. Queen a4 by Tal, and you may think, what is the queen doing there? After queen to b3, we see that the queen was on her way to f4, highlighting that f2 is a weakness and stopping Spassky from doubling the rooks. Queen g3 therefore, to try to make the queen leave the f-pawn, but simply queen to f5. But since the queen now guards f2, Spassky was able to move his rook anyway, and the pressure on the c-file does look a bit awkward, but bishop to b7 still ensures black the advantage. Black still keeps everything protected, and the two bishops are simply a lot better than white's extra rook. Now, don't go queen b8 check, thinking Tal just blundered the bishop on b7, because after king to h7 and queen takes bishop, black has a simple discovered attack after bishop takes f2 check, and rook takes c2, and white can resign. Spassky did play the best move, queen to f3, now threatening to trade queens and then take the bishop, so queen to g5. Now white shouldn't go back to g3, that loses tactically to bishop takes f2 check. If queen takes, then white loses all his pieces after queen c1 check, rook takes rook check, queen f1 and rook takes queen, and at the end black is up a piece. But king takes also loses because of the simple rook takes rook check and queen f5 check, and again black is a piece up. But Spassky wasn't born yesterday, he instead played queen to b3, but unfortunately for him, black's position is already too good and Tal did win the game soon. Rook c7 guarding the bishop, and after g3, bishop takes f2 check. That move was in the air for a while already, but I can imagine it was still a shock for Spassky. He has to take with the king, otherwise it would be a swift checkmate after rook takes c1, but now the king is wide open to all kinds of checks and attacks. First, queen f6 check, king to e1, queen e5 check, king to f1, then the bishop got involved with check, king to g1, queen d4 check, king to g2. After queen e4 check, white's queen still cannot block because the rook on c2 would hang with check, so king to g1, but after bishop to b7, after first forcing the king close to the corner, queen h1 check is a massive threat. The game is about to end. Spassky tried h4, but then queen h1 check, and after king to f2, rook f7 check, king to e2, and queen e4 check, Spassky resigned. He resigned because he will at the very least lose a rook. If king to d1, then rook d7 check. The king has nowhere to go, so rook to d2, but after first queen h1 check, and then bishop e4 check, the king cannot hold on to both rooks. After king b2, the rook on d2 falls, and if king to c3, then queen takes rook check, and then black can simply trade off the rook and the queen and win easily with the extra piece. Very nice game by Mikhail Tal. Surely this is one of the best games he ever played. Let's quickly check some key moments. So after opening with this offbeat variation of the Nimzo, Tal quickly decided to spice things up with this pawn sack. Then Spassky, being a pawn up, didn't want to give the material back, although he really should have, because after pawn takes a6, the trouble really started with knight to c6. And then Tal played this great combination with d4 and rook takes f3. Tal then proved his two bishops were clearly better than Spassky's rook, but at this point he saw it was time to give up one of the bishops because he would get a devastating attack. And after the king was checked and attacked endlessly, Spassky had to admit defeat, and Tal also ended up winning the tournament. So please let me know in the comments what you think of this game. Do you have any favorite Tal games you want me to look at? I'll definitely keep looking at his games either way. Other games are also already underway, so I'll be seeing you guys again soon, and take care.